as we normally would do so. So we'll end just after Election Day. So as we finish that, we'll talk a little bit more about what's going on at the end of the show, about what's coming up. Since our last guest was here in the studio, the City of Auburn has adopted a new 2020-2021 budget. Saw its minor league franchise, the Auburn Doubledays, have to cancel and probably have its last season in Auburn. Started to move forward with the Seminary Ave Public Safety Building, and saw the announcement of its police chief about a month and a half ago say that he was going to retire in the next year. And now, after nearly a decade, they're close to resolving a decade-old legal issues revolving around the old Calet property on Upper State Street. With us to talk about all of this and more.
Family at City Hall has been through some changes, as you know, early on due to some state regulations or guidance. We reduced our workforce, so we, for the protection of our City Hall employees, we reduced workforce, closed to the public, and then a couple of months ago, reopened to the public.
And during that period, did you lay off people, or did you just reduce when they're going to be in place?
No, we continued to pay people. That was guidance that we received from New York State, was that...
So the governor had a directive, if I remember correctly, that government offices could...
To get things done, certainly not as streamlined as it had been before, but we've learned new things, and we've learned about some other efficiencies that might be there.
So how are you adjusting to make sure that they are safe?
So at City Hall, we've made some physical changes, much like you'd see in any retail establishment or office setting or a school setting. We tried to partner with local manufacturers to do that, and so we put in physical barriers and policies. Most of the things are any exposure would have on public safety. So we early on locked down the police and fire departments, and they remain locked down. So if you were to go to the fire department after this interview, you wouldn't be let in, right? So public safety obviously is a big issue, and we don't want to have a situation where one person is exposed or infected and have it impact a significant part of the workforce. That it creates a problem
you can wipe
for
out
us
a whole crew.
Right, it creates a problem for us.
At least
to
social
provide
distance. I shouldn't say wipe out. That's a bad term. You could at least have them all in quarantine and that.
To the public, but like most other organizations, we have a check-in procedure for our employees.
So you have steps in place to protect not only your staff, but also the public as well.
Correct. And we ask the public to try to limit their trips to City Hall, and that's not to not be transparent. That's not to keep anything hidden, but there is a real exposure issue, right? So we have so many people that come in and out. So we've encouraged paying bills online, calling for appointments, trying to get information over the telephone rather than come in.
So we have an older, there's no other choice.
Yeah, we've still got quite a bit of traffic at City Hall, and we still have a lot of folks that like to pay their bills in cash, and they like to know that somebody's received it, you know, so it's a cultural thing.
So how about on Thursday nights? What are you doing with, I mean, you can still, as you could before, still view everything on video?
Correct, and there was a period of time where we couldn't have the public in the building, so we were, you know, we'd broadcast those. We had some counselors % capacity tops, right? So whatever it's rated.
But right now you haven't had a whole lot of controversial issues, so it's not like people are packing. So you've made some changes. I'm assuming there's an expense there. Where did you get the things that, because you put up barriers and things like that?
You know, we had expenses early on, like I think most institutions did, to expand their IT capabilities so that people could remote work, so that people could remotely participate in meetings, and that those same meetings could be security enhancement to some extent, which doesn't hurt in a public building, and the safety, COVID safety, and
so you've used some local businesses to help you.
Yeah, we you know, right along throughout this, we've had a number of local businesses that stepped up to help us in various ways. For instance, Courier Plastics makes tiny little bottles for the hotel industry, right, for shampoos and things like that. And you know, there was early on, you may recall, there was a step up to build barriers You know, the physical
Right.
plexiglass barriers that might sit at a desk or a conference table. Mac Studios and Bowmare both changed product lines and came up with face shields were in high demand and low availability for
Right.
quite a while. So both of those manufacturers stepped up to do that. And then, of course, we have Tessie Plastics that is filling a national need at this
Right.
point. So.
So let's switch to the budget for a little bit. You had a budget that was approved. What was the vote on the budget back in June?
Yes.
Unanimous?
Yes.
Or-
Normally, we
Through
try
you.
to really scrutinize things, and we locked that budget down right in the beginning of March.
So you're near the end of your first quarter. It ends day after tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I can't get you, we would normally do this later in the month.
Right.
Are you on track, as it looks like in this first quarter, especially on sales tax?
So sales tax is down compared to last year, right? So that was a big discussion in budget development was, you know, where are we going to by 12%? At this point, we're outperforming that right now. We're doing better than that.
So you're doing better than your targets, but your targets are lower, largely because you have a large part of your sales tax comes from restaurants and people buying
Right.
hard goods or consumables, and other than Tops, Wegmans, and grocery stores, and people aren't taking long trips. If you're all
Right.
working remotely, you don't get gas money.
Right.
The fuel.
So, you know, again, our
When I interviewed, I think the mayor, I'm not promoting him right now, but the mayor 2 weeks ago, it looked like there was a $14.5 billion starting in April deficit. There is an expectation that's going to trickle down to municipalities. Do you get a lot of direct aid from Albany, comparable, not as much as you would if you were a school district, where we had Jeff Parazola on a couple of weeks ago, or the
Correct.
county when we had Trish Kerr on here?
So for example, when we received our allocation, it was 80% of our typical allocation. The remaining 20% is out there somewhere. We don't know if we are going to receive it at a later date, if we'll receive it at a later date at a reduced amount, or if it will not come at all.
Okay.
Similarly, we were just notified today, so my council probably not like that if they hear it in this.
You got 2 hours after this to call them
That's
off.
right, but that doesn't impact this year's budget, that'll impact the development of next year.
So why I ask all these questions are, you have not at this stage made reductions in city staff for this year, correct?
Correct. We haven't done it. We will look at positions carefully as they come up and vacancies arise.
And how about if you start getting more cuts from, again, 14.5 billion with a
We'll
B?
have to look at things, and we've had discussions. As a
So
matter
you
of fact,
expect you might have to do so at some point?
it's a possibility. It's certainly got to look at.
So while all this is going on, if you drive over to Seminary Avenue, there's fencing around, part of the property there for the public safety building. Where are you in the process right now?
So that building the site is under construction as of about a week or two ago.
And when do you hope to finish?
It's slated for September, October next year is the target date.
And how much is the overall budget?
So generally, the overall budget's around $10 million. We've got a little over $3 million in grant funding.
So some of that's the Downtown Revitalization Initiative money and other?
Yep, some of that is downtown revitalization money, and some of it's also $2 million we had from DEC, a DEC grant that was obtained several years ago.
And what will go in there?
That will be the fire department, and there's a couple other smaller city functions that may operate out of that building.
There was a discussion at one point about the county having some presence there. Is that still in negotiation? Did it fall through? Or did it occur?
There hasn't been a lot of discussion about it. There has been some discussion, and there was some agreement between the county and the city to share an emergency operations center space that will be built into that building. So while there may not be staff at the building, functionally there will be a portion of the building that can be utilized by the county.
So there's
or the
still
city.
some space in there.
There is some shared services, and that's what we were aiming for, because again, there's some collaboration that can happen between some county departments and the city fire department, and there's potential cost savings, sir.
So there's a couple viewer questions on this on two different subjects. Let's deal with the one you're just talking about. There's the Save-A-Lot property next door. Was there a reason why it wasn't purchased from Washington Street Associates? Couldn't you use that to enlarge the footprint of the space?
Could have, but it would have been more money. So, you know, all along, we've looked at this project.
Are you interested in purchasing that building?
It would be great to have it right now, but again, that would need to be a different discussion, really, you know, because that's...
So the viewer asked, because why wouldn't you have bought it? Because at some point, couldn't you have done more government consolidation there?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
But that's it would have been a significant expense on in anticipation of something that may or may not happen.
Now, is the governor still incentivizing local governments to do cost savings and then give you a payment back?
Shared Services Initiative, yes.
Have you ever gotten any money from the governor?
We are still working on that. We've got a couple projects.
Because one would have been Falcon Park.
And we are fighting mightily to...
How much do you hope to get?
There's a strange calculation that goes into figuring out...
Really? With New York State? I'm shocked.
That goes into figuring out what might be eligible, and our calculations are in the neighborhood of $700,000.
Okay.
On that.
So will that go to the city, the county, or the college?
That would go to pay down the debt so
on the
that
bonds.
Everybody's...
Uniformly. We'll come back to double days in a moment.
Sure.
One other viewer question on this. So I got sent some copies of some letters that talk about a laundry that was displaced at the Seminary Ave area. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
So what happened?
So when the property that will be utilized for the fire station housed the laundromat that you just mentioned, housed a rent-to-own business, and the rest of it was vacant. In our communication and negotiation and discussion with Washington Street Partners over the last several years as we've been trying to work through this, they informed us that those leases were on a month-to-month basis and that the tenants were aware of what was going on.
So does that means that laundromat has been displaced? Is the city working through economic development to help it open back up?
We've offered some things. We haven't offered necessarily cash, actual cash to do that, but we've offered whatever programs we have to make that happen.
Because as I understand it, again, this is all based on what a viewer sent in, is
Right.
that the equipment is right now in the Save-A-Lot with the hope, but there's some expenses there for water hookup, electrical. Is that something the city would help in?
It's possible. We acquired that property, I believe, in January. There's been no rent charged on that property since January.
Okay.
So there's a significant savings to the property owner for the last nine months that
I mean,
operation
the
continued.
tenant.
The tenant, I'm
The
sorry.
tenant, okay.
Yes.
All right. Switch to another project that's in the news this week. The Citizen reported on Sunday that it looks like some longstanding issues regarding the Callett property, or the old Callett building on Upper State Street across from Nash's art store. What's going on there? What's being proposed?
Well, there's been several public meetings about that over the last few years to try to
At
get
least 10.
public input on what people thought should go there, and then that focused the attention on some sort of a public space. And then there were several other follow-up meetings to propose different designs of that public space. So we are hopeful that we can move forward with the most recent version of
So it's a
that.
smaller park there because 4 parcels will be subdivided to the property that would be A.T. Wally's, Mr. Driscoll, the real estate, what I call the Red Cross block.
Right.
And then another larger piece to Mr. Camardo.
Correct.
So Mr. Driscoll's property is on, or the property adjacent to that is on the agenda for this week.
Yes.
So who will pay for the cost transfers of all those properties?
The owners of those adjacent properties.
And all those properties will go back on the tax rolls.
Correct.
So there's been a long-standing dispute between the city and Mr. Camardo over some alleged environmental issues. Have they been resolved as far as he and the city are concerned?
I can't speak for Mr. Camardo. I can say that we've had productive dialogue, and I think we're moving in the right direction, and I think we'll get to a point where we can agree on what needs to be done there.
So he has not released you as of yet to do this project?
I guess you could say that, yeah.
Because this is the viewer question. Why would you do these in parcels until you get that larger strip resolved? Because you could be giving property to Mr. Driscoll, the AT Wallace, and the Red Cross, and still not have resolved the issue.
Well, some of it comes down to the fact that we have a vision for that area, right? We have a vision, and that vision's based upon the communication and discussion we've had with the various property owners. We think we know what the vision is for the various property owners around there, and in some cases, in order for them to make betterments to their buildings, they need that property. So to me, that's a good thing, right? If we can compromise, get them what they need so that they can make better use out of their property, and we can use that to get to a point where we actually get that hole in the ground filled in, and we can take down that big old fence that's there, the
So
wall.
when would you see all 4 properties transferred if they occur?
I'd love to see it done within the next 60 days. I don't know if that will happen
And then
or
from
not.
there, when would you, so a large part of the park area is downtown revitalization initiative money, correct?
Right, there's a grant for that, covers
So-
part of that.
So who covers the other part?
We've been having discussions with a variety of different potential funding sources where there might be some offset.
So do you have an idea of how much this will cost?
You had to ask me that off the top of my head. It's just shy of $2 million.
So if you do this, the city's also expended a lot of legal effort over time. Those are all costs that have been built into this, but if you can't put the package together with other funders, will this be something the city does on its own?
We will have to look at that and see if maybe we change the scope, or maybe change the level of finish, things like that to make it happen.
Last question on this one. When would you hope to start doing park work? Is that a 2021 project?
More than likely it would be. Ideally, we could at least start to fill the hole in. You're probably familiar with it.
I am.
People
I am.
in the public may
I am
not be.
unfortunately very familiar with it. That's why I'm asking.
So, we'd like to do some stabilization in the area and make it a little bit safer than it is, and get some things moving.
So do you think it's, when you say safer, do you think it's environmentally unsafe, or you mean stability-wise?
No, just it's a very large hole in the ground
Okay.
that I'd like to see. Just a piece of flat earth would.
And by the way, there's an expense to filling in a hole.
Yes.
It could get quite expensive.
Yes.
So you've got other projects real quickly on 2 of them. You've got State Street Bridge. What's the status of that project right now?
State Street Bridge is moving along. It is, if it's not on schedule, it's very close to schedule at this point. The main structural steel was set last week, and it will be.
It's very cool if you drive by slowly, but not let the traffic behind you catch up to you.
Yes. So, concrete work continues, but the main concrete work to support the steel is done. The steel's being set. That project is slated to wrap up by the end of the year.
End of this calendar year.
The end of this calendar year, as far as traffic being able to go over that bridge. We're
So you think you're close to on track on that?
so far, we are on track for that.
How much is it going to cost roughly?
Off the top of my head, that was around $5 million, I think, on that.
And
project.
the most of that's coming from the state of New York, correct? Is there a city share in that?
There's a small city share on that project. If you were familiar with that bridge, we had some issues with it over the last few years. There was actually some holes in it that
Right.
we could see right down into the water. But again, the project's coming along well. It will
So
incorporate
basically in
a
3
small
years, you've
park
done
in
2
the
big
corner.
bridges right now. You've done North Division and this one.
Yes.
So your next big road work project sounds like, besides your annual road work project, by the way, is that on track or done?
It's just about wrapped up. They were doing some microsurfacing this week. That should pretty much wrap up, weather permitting, which I'm not sure that's going to cooperate. Within the next week or so, we'll be
One
wrapped
can
up.
only hope. So what is the status of, you're doing a large project with the state of New York for South Street. What's envisioned?
So that project's also been in the works for many, many years. The scope of the project, what's visible to the public would be that the road would be widened slightly to more or less duplicate the rest of South Street into the center of the city with the ornamental lighting and sidewalks and curbs and things like that.
So those were all done about 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Does that mean you'll put new lights in and new?
Just from Clymer Street to the city line.
To the city, so going the other way?
Right, so we're working
Okay.
from Clymer out.
And the cost on that one?
Around, we're talking around $6 million on that one by the time we get through, but that will include also all the infrastructure underneath. So it will be a totally new road. It's not like a mill and pave, it will be a totally
And
new
the
road.
city shares roughly, it's under $900,000 on that.
Yes, and we're trying to work that down. New York State's working with us to try to actually whittle that down further. So it would be new water, new sewer, new storm sewer. You can see when you go down through there, the electric has been taken care of by that utility, and there's a creek down there that goes through a culvert. That culvert would also get replaced.
I did want to go back to the state of New York. So you've got a $10 million visitor center across from City Hall there. One of the issues that came up was the city has to maintain the visitor center. Have you figured out what it costs you annually as a city for that?
Yes, so we've got a budget for it. There is some offset from the state of New York for that, and then we have rents from the chamber and bid as well. So there's some offsets in there. Total budget for that is, we end up being around $100,000.
So the city's on the hook for about $100,000 annually. And do you expect the Business Improvement District to be the manager for that for the long term?
Yes.
Because it was a one-year original agreement. Have you extended that now?
There was that just was renewed recently. I can't remember exactly when we renewed that.
Water quality. We might not be thinking because there's a whole lot of other stuff going on. At this state, what's the purity of our water at the Auburn, once it comes out of the Auburn? Well, both going in and out of the Auburn.
An important distinction, right?
It is.
It's interesting. Last summer was a good summer for us.
When you say last summer, 2020 or 2019?
2019.
2019,
Had
okay.
a pretty good summer. Didn't need to utilize the PAC system very often last summer. This summer we were doing good, and then August and September things started to ramp up again.
So are there identifiable traces of blue-green algae?
Yes.
Or other contaminants?
Yes, in the raw water.
Okay.
But our PAC system, our powder activated carbon system, is working just like it was designed to. It's doing its job, and our finished water is good with no detectable.
And you
microsystem.
would expect that system to work until when, this fall?
We could run it year-round if we wanted to. We'll run it as long as we have to until we know we're getting pure water, with no microsystem in it on the raw side of the operation. So however long that happens to take.
So last two questions, topics. Sean Butler, your police chief, announced about a month and a half ago, maybe almost 2 months ago by now, that he was going to retire in a year. First of all, was that a surprise to you?
No, not really. Not based on conversations that we had had. So, he has his own personal plan for himself and his family. So those were things that were, I think, in his overall plan. So not necessarily a surprise, and I appreciate the fact that he was willing to make that public so early on, because that gives us an opportunity to make a transition into whatever the new leadership is going to
So
look like.
this will be a civil service position, correct?
Correct, yep.
So have you made an appointment? Have you started the process?
No, we haven't started the process yet. There's been a few things going on that we've been getting our
Really?
arms around.
Okay.
But I do plan on probably in December, January, we'll start that process, and we'll start to do whatever we need to do to
So will you
transition
run a
somebody.
test first? Do you have enough time to do a test first and then an appointment?
There is already a valid and binding civil
Because
service
that's been a
list for that
problem
position.
with the city in the past, where a chief leaves without a lot of notice and you don't have a valid list.
Right.
So
So we-
you have
we-
a reachable list now?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So it could be internal, it could be external?
It would be internal.
An internal candidate?
Yes.
Okay. Might give us any names?
No.
No, okay. So, tonight, or sometime today, the playoffs, at least in our house, have started. One part of that is that the national playoffs are occurring, but for the double days, there has not been a season in 2020. What is their status? And I say that because you are the point. The mayor passed the buck to you when he was on here last.
Yes.
He said, ask the manager. So what's the status of the double days?
It's been a tough year, right? Anything that could potentially happen with a franchise like that has happened. COVID made it impossible to play, not just at the local level, but practically anywhere you went. So there was no season this year, and we've been mired down in the player development contract controversy between Major League Baseball and Minor League Baseball since this time last year, and there is still no resolve to that.
So was this supposed to be the last season this year, or is next year supposed to be what was originally planned? Forget what
Right, so this season, we'll call it 2020, we were still under contract, player development contract with the Washington Nationals. All our franchise stuff was still in effect with minor league baseball, and you know, it
would have ended this year.
Correct, and they would have been all subject to renegotiation at that point.
But the owners weren't interested in. This is my opinion, not your opinion, but you can nod one way or the other. The owners have made the decision they're not going to have a New York Penn League in the end.
I think maybe majority, if you looked at the majority, that's where some of this seems to be.
So does that mean that we are not going to have a final 2021 season in your mind at Falcon Park?
It's a possibility. There are a lot of things on the table. There's a lot of discussion about, you know, what ifs and how do we keep professional baseball, minor league baseball in small markets, right? So there's local discussions going on, but nationally, and especially in the New York Penn League, there's a lot of discussions about, okay, if this doesn't happen, if things aren't renewed like like we're used to, what are the options?
So the city is one of the few owners of a team compared to private ownership. Do you expect, if there is no renewal of the contract, that Major League Baseball will pay you any money for the value of your team?
There's rumors. That's a big reason for us to stay in the game, if you will.
No pun intended.
And stick with the New York Penn League and just make sure that you know, the investment that's been put into that facility and that team over the years, that if that were to happen, that we're
because there are a lot in the New York Penn League, there are a lot of private owners who could be left out in the dark.
Right. That have honestly quite a significantly higher investment in their franchises than we have had.
Right, because the city right now has owned this franchise now for 41, 42 plus years.
And essentially inherited the franchise.
Yes, to say the least. So one of the other issues is, are you even staffing this at this stage?
We've kept the general manager on in order to keep in communication with the Washington Nationals, New York Penn League, try to take care of all of the business-related things that have to happen, and to help us wind down a little bit. So getting inventory.
So do you see him continuing to the end of 2020 or 2021?
No, the contract we had with David Lindbergh went through, I believe it's October 31st, and we've had that discussion, and his work with the Auburn Double Days will end on October 31st, along with his contract.
And then you'll figure out where you go. So will then communications with Major League Baseball be through you?
Yes.
All right, I forgot, there is two other viewer questions. Will there be a holiday parade?
We have a meeting tomorrow morning about that, and as it stands, I don't like to say that before we know, but it is not likely, right? If we look at everything that's going on
So the
right
likelihood of
now,
a tree lighting by Santa and a whole crowd is doubtful 2 days after Thanksgiving.
right? You know, fortunately and unfortunately, we get a great turnout to those events.
It's a fantastic event. It's a fun event.
Right, but with the restrictions that are in place for gatherings, I don't see how it's feasible for us to do that, or how it's prudent for us
I got a viewer question on that.
to endorse
I need to ask that.
As much as everybody, I think everybody's busting at the seams to get out and do some sort of social interaction, that's a pretty big event.
Thank you for your time. Our guest has been City Manager Jeff DYGERT. We would more than likely have him on twice this year, but we're not going to be able to do that. I would hope you come back in the spring. By that time, you'll know something from the state of New York. We'll know where we are with COVID-19 a little bit more, and maybe even Major League Baseball.
We would hope. Yes, on all accounts. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. On Thursday, we'll be back with Community College President Brian Durant. He's going to talk to us about this new semester here at the college in a COVID-19 world and how that's impacting college students and our operations here. So everybody in the studio will be attentive. Next Tuesday, Renee Jensen, the Vice President of the Cuyahoga County United Way, will be in to discuss their 2020 campaign that is just kicking off this week and last week. And starting the week of October 12th, we will start a series of candidate forums here for offices covering Cuyahoga County, co-sponsored by the Citizen. And these are all for the New York State Legislature. On Tuesday, October 13th, we'll have the 130th Assembly District with the incumbent Assemblyman Brian McAlow, who is being challenged by Scott Comegee. We have tentatively set up on Thursday, October 15th, the 24th Congressional Forum. That's one exception to state races. Unfortunately, John Katko, the incumbent, has again declined the invitation of the college, as he has done over the last several years. Democrat Dana Balter has accepted, and we are waiting to hear back today from challenger Steve Williams, who's on the Working Families Party. If Mr. Williams declines our invitation, then the forum will turn into a one-on-one interview beyond the front page. On Tuesday, October 20th, the 51st Senate District Forum will be held with Jim Barber and Peter Oberrocker. That is to fill the seat being created by the vacancy created by the retirement of Senator James Seward, who's been in the Senate since 1986. Followed on Thursday, October 22nd, with the 50th Senate District Forum with John Mannion against Angie Renna. That's to fill the seat open due to the resignation of first-term Senator Robert Antonacci, who went to the state Supreme Court back in January. On Tuesday, October 27th, we'll have our final forum for the 126th Assembly District with Dia Carvajal, who's a Democrat, running against John Lamottes, who a Republican, to fill the seat being vacated by the retirement of Assemblyman Gary D. Finch. I'll moderate the forums, and questions will be asked, as always, by Citizen Executive Editor Jeremy Boyer. Before we go, though, if you would like to send questions for guests or thoughts for guests for just Inside Government or Beyond the Front Page, you can send them to COZGUY at AOL.com, speaking a little too quickly there, or send them by snail mail at 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York, 13021. I'm Guy Cosentino for Community College. We want to thank you for watching. We hope you be safe. Have a good night. Have a great tomorrow. And we will see you back here on Thursday with College President Brian Durant.